Good evening and welcome to the November 8th, 2023 East Lansing Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Bartley, would you please take the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Boyd.
Here.
Commissioner Denault.
Here.
Commissioner Hendricks. Commissioner Lapine.
Here.
Commissioner Wagner. Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Vice Chair Bowman.
Here.
Chair Sullivan.
Here.
Thank you. We have 6 here and 2 absent, and we have quorum.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Vice Chair Bowman, seconded by Commissioner Lapine. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the October 25th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting?
Motion to approve the October 25th, 2023 meeting.
Moved by Commissioner Boyd, seconded by Commissioner Williams. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. That brings us to committee reports. I don't think we have any. So item number 3, staff reports. Mr. Bartley?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up with a couple items from last time. There was a request, I believe, from Commissioner Lapine to ask the Department of Public Works the status of a pilot program in the Bailey neighborhood to have one-sided parking on the street. And I confirmed with the DPW director that that pilot program is done and it's just become the pilot program is in place. I guess it's become permanent. So you should expect to see one-side street parking in Bailey from now on. There was also a question about the work in Bailey neighborhood that's been done with utilities. That's a local utility project by consumers, and it's scheduled to finish by the end of this month. And then they're going to transfer all their equipment down to Grandover and Hagedorn. So you should be seeing that wrapping up fairly soon. I also want to mention in Bailey neighborhood, as you know, there was a request from Board of Water and Light that's had some interest in the neighborhood and some concerns, and we scheduled a neighborhood meeting for next Monday, November 13th at the library, 5:30 p.m. To discuss this. We'll have Board of Water and Light staff on hand to discuss the proposal in more detail. Anyone is welcome. But yeah, we should be there from 5:30 probably until 7 or so. And our intent is not to have a formal presentation, but rather as people come in and check things out, they can ask questions. If we have a crowd, it might make sense to do a formal presentation, but we'll see how it goes. So those of you near 683 Stoddard and those in the audience or listening online, please do spread the word about that meeting. Again, that's about the Stoddard and Bircham project from the Board of Water and Light on Monday the 13th, next Monday at 5:30 p.m. at the library. Wanted to mention that we do have some commissioners' terms coming up for reappointment or limited out. Commissioners Hendricks and Lapine are both up to be reappointed for another term, and both have said, yes, I'm interested, so we'll be bringing that to the City Council in the beginning of December. Mr. Bowman's term is unfortunately limited, so we'll be very sad to see him leave the commission after how many years? 8 years. On this commission and many others too, so thank you for your service, and we look forward to having you one last time in December. One more thing too is the ZBA heard a request last week for solar, a system on a rooftop that exceeds the current definition of small solar array, which is 15 kilowatts. The request was for a church, All Saints Church, to install 33.6 kilowatts on the roof, which isn't allowed right now because that's defined as utility scale when it exceeds 15 kilowatts. So the ZBA approved that variance, and staff has in discussions with other commissioners and council members, we are going to be moving forward with a potential amendment to the zoning ordinance to I guess have a little bit clearer policy and see if we need to update that ordinance that governs solar in the city right now. I hope to have a couple meetings coming up, maybe in December, but hoping to have draft language to the Planning Commission to consider as soon as January. So I will keep you informed on that. One thing I wanted to point out as well is that that wasn't in the packet when we published it last week, but is as of today. I had a misunderstanding with Mr. Morzowski, who spoke to you last time during public comment about an RM4 zone district that he's proposing. So he wanted to include that as communications, written communications, for you to at least see what he's proposing and take some time and be able to consider it. And so that is in your packet right now in its entirety at the end of communication from citizens. And I've reached out to Mr. Morzowski and said, let's meet as staff to talk about this, maybe a planning commissioner or two. We could establish a subcommittee if this is of interest to pursue at this point. I admit I have a little bit of hesitancy about moving forward with a new zone district while we have, at least my interest, as I've stated to the Planning Commission, is to move forward with a master plan update next year with the idea of sort of taking a new look at all the zone districts as they are now and seeing what updates we need to make. So my intent is to take a larger look at the zone districts. If something like the proposed RM4 district makes a lot of sense, I'd love to adopt it at that point. I do think it is probably worthwhile, though, to meet and at least consider what's in there and determine if we want to move forward at this point. So I wanted to let you know about that and open it to however you'd like to move forward with that, if at all. And then the final thing is, as you know, as I just mentioned, I am looking to do a master plan update, and it is the Planning Commission's purview to review the previous update, which I brought to you last time, and make a determination on whether we'd like to, as a commission, move forward with a new master plan, with an amended or updated master plan, or take no action at all. So if you're comfortable making, or at least giving me some guidance tonight, I'd love to move ahead with the update process. And my intent is, if you were to say yes, go ahead, get started, I guess. I haven't started at all so far, just in saying, hey, I'd like to do a master plan update. But until you say yes, go ahead, I'm going to hold off. So my intent would be to have some very basic community engagement, probably in December, including potentially the December 9th event here in Hannah, the Winterfest. That's a Saturday. Just to sort of understand, hey, there's a master plan. It's 5 years old. Let's get some initial comments from citizens. And then I would look to bring some more formal proposal as far as the actual scope of work for the update that I'm proposing to you in January, and probably the City Council shortly thereafter. So if there are any questions about anything I've just thrown at you, please let me know. Otherwise, we can move on to communications.
Any questions for Mr. Bartley? All right, seeing none, that brings us on to item number 4, Commissioner announcements. Are there any? Seeing none. Item 5, communications from citizens. 5.1, written communications.
Yes.
With the exception of item 5.3, there are 3 written communications from citizens. I believe all of those are on item 7.1 on the agenda. Brings us to item number 5.2, verbal from the audience. At this point, if there are members of the audience that wish to come forward and address the commission, typically, if those comments are for the item that's up for a public hearing, I would ask that you reserve those for that time if possible. If not, please come forward and address the commission.
And so just to clarify, the public hearing tonight is for rezoning of a parcel near 3512 Coolidge Road. Old business not up for a public hearing tonight is a rezoning request for 730 Grove from R2 to RM32.
Correct, thank you. So at this point, if you wish to come, if you wish to come forward and talk about the Grove application, this would be your time to do that.
To do that now or at the more appropriate time?
This is the time to do so. Thank you. Yep.
I'm Deborah Ann Stewart. I've been a resident for 64 years on Grove Street and now a property owner as well. I wanted to share just a few points from the Stewart family letter, including Geoffrey Stewart's remarks and James Stewart's thoughts, as well as my own. Our letter is in support for maintaining College Grove as a historic district by maintaining the current R2 single-family zoning for 730 Grove Street and therefore denying the request for rezoning from R2 to RM32 zoning at this time. To wait for more appropriate zoning codes to go through approval procedures. We thank the Planning Commission members for their time and talent to serve on the commission. Our father, Roger Henry Stewart, served over 15 years on East Lansing Planning and Zoning Commissions and Boards, giving his time and love for the community. As a property tax appeals consultant, he was very aware of how zoning affected the worth of properties and the composition of neighborhoods. We think he would have advised the Planning Commission to wait to adopt a more appropriate zoning code for the area. I write, as I told you, as a 64-year resident and now property owner of Grove Street, concerned about the neighborhood. Most concerning is the fact that rezoning to RM32 allows for many more uses than what is addressed in the application. It is an overreach from the 2018 master plan suggestions. Also, please note, an action to approve would be premature and contrary to the actions and suggestions noted by East Lansing City Council members in the previous review of requests for change of zonings in the 700 block of Grove Street. More specifically, it was discussed in East Lansing City Council sessions that the 2018 master plan is in need of revision due to passage of time and building construction of many apartment complexes. All agreed it is time for the 5-year revision of the master plan. Also specific to the request, an Airbnb would not enrich the neighborhood as property owners are not required to live on site to supervise guests or property management. At this time, Planning Commission members should wait for a neighborhood and East Lansing Commission and City Council agreement on future zoning. A better zoning category, more consistent with the 2018 master plan recommendations, has been suggested by architect builder neighbor Tim Merzowski and has been referred to the city. It is critical at this time to maintain current zoning until a more appropriate zoning category goes through procedural proper review. Also, the applicant's proposal to enlarge and pave the duplex's driveway raises additional concerns for parking and traffic. There are 4 to 5 cars currently in the 730 Grove driveway. An Airbnb would significantly impact traffic flow and safety in an area where numerous high school students walk 4 times a day. Parking and traffic would be a safety hazard and negatively affect the neighborhood on a daily basis. As previously stated, may Planning Commission members please wait for a more appropriate zoning category for the entire Grove Street area before making rezoning changes to the 730 Grove Street application. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to share remarks.
Thank you. Any additional members of the public that wish to come forward and address the commission? No? Was that a yes? No? Maybe? No? Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. Seeing none, is there anyone online in the queue?
We have nobody waiting in the queue.
Thank you. All right. That brings us on to item number 6, public hearings. Item 6.1, a public hearing to consider Ordinance 1527, an application from the Eyde Family, LLC, and Leo Brown, LLC, to rezone a 2.29 acre vacant parcel immediately north of and to be combined with 3512 Coolidge Road. Thank you. Mr. Bartley?
Thank you. I'm just pulling this up real quick on my computer. Apologies. Thank you for your patience as I pulled that up. This request is a request from Georgia Eyde Family LLC and Leo Brown Group LLC to rezone a 2.29 acre portion of a vacant parcel, which is located immediately north and east of 3512 Coolidge Road. Trying to show this partial parcel on the zoning map that's outlined. The survey later on in the packet is accurate. This outline that I've shown in the staff page is pretty approximate. But the applicant is seeking to rezone that new parcel to be created, and which would also be combined with the parcel to the south and west that's currently zoned B1. The applicant is seeking to also rezone this partial parcel from A, which is a special district, from DeWitt Township Agricultural. This is DeWitt Township zoning because this parcel is part of an area transferred in 2001 from DeWitt Township to East Lansing through a 425 agreement. So this is currently zoned A, DeWitt Township Agricultural, but any future zone changes from that current zoning would need to go into a East Lansing zoning district, and so the applicant is seeking the B1 zoning, which is the same as the adjacent parcel, and into which they hope to combine the subject parcel. I will just note too that the current parcel, the child parcel that's seeking rezoning to the B1 is not actually, could not be created as its own parcel. It doesn't meet the requirements of the Land Division Act, so if it must be combined with another parcel to meet the requirements of the Division Act. I defer to the applicant to speak more on that, but should you approve this or recommend approval to the City Council, we would look for a condition that it must be combined, because otherwise it would not be able to be split off as proposed. Does that make sense? Okay. So as far as the master plan designation of this property, this subject site is considered R4, which you're familiar with from other hearings. That's residential up to 16 units per acre. And that designation does list extended care and nursing home as a potential future land use map, which is the current use of the property at 3512 Coolidge, which is zone B1. The applicant would seek to create a use similar or exactly the same as extended care. I'm going to defer to them a little bit on the use, but I don't want to get into it too much because it could be any use that's allowed in the B1 business district, which is outlined in your staff report if this were approved. The likelihood of that happening is fairly low because the applicant would have to combine this parcel with the existing B1 property. So it would be very unlikely, if not impossible, for them to construct anything else besides, in addition to what's currently on the property. But again, I'll defer to them to talk about their use. Just emphasizing that the use discussion, again, is not material as far as what is proposed exactly. You should consider this as any potential use allowed in the B1 could go here when you're considering the zoning request, zone district change request. So, does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions for me? I'm happy to go through the staff report in more detail, but that pretty much sums it up.
Any questions? It's good for me. Thank you. Well, ready for the applicant. Mr. Pearson?
David Pearson here this evening on behalf of Leo Brown Group and Brightwell Behavioral, who would be the operator and currently has the facility that's there now. Chris King and Gene Scallon from Leo Brown Group and Brightwell are here to answer questions, and frankly, I'll ask Gene to get up and give you a couple-minute sort of overview of what the facility is and what's proposed for the new facility. One thing I should mention to follow on the comments on the Land Division Act. This parcel only has 80 feet of frontage, and it's 636 feet deep, and it's a flag lot. So it can't be approved as a separate parcel It comes under the Land Division Act as what's commonly known as an adjacent parcel transfer. So it would simply change the boundary lines of the existing parcel. You have a conceptual site plan in your packet, which generally shows what it might look like. There isn't a final site plan. To be honest, what we're waiting on is the final certificate of need numbers on what can be there. And so until that's decided, we're kind of stuck. We're hoping to get that in for your December meeting, but it may not be until January. And frankly, if the rezoning were held to look at it at the same time as a site plan, it would probably make sense for your purposes as well. One thing that I should mention is the facility that's there is a geriatric psychiatric facility, and what it provides is shorter term, meaning like weeks, of inpatient care for people who otherwise are at assisted living or independent living but need inpatient care for some time. The only facility in this area that has that kind of care, unfortunately, is Sparrow Hospital in downtown Lansing, with all that goes with being in a hospital. If I could compare it to something, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the emergency room facility, urgent care that Sparrow built on Jolly Road near Okemos. They are rated for every kind of care up to except trauma. So I guess from the psychiatric side, this is the other side of that coin. And it could be considered, frankly, a hospital under your zoning ordinance, which is also permitted in the B1. Back when Mr. Haywood was there and the first facility was built, we tried to make it really, really complicated. And finally, everybody landed on B1 and said, it just works there. There's no reason to do a text amendment to do this. The property is immediately north of the Willows, which is primarily known as an extended care facility, but in fact about 50 of the beds there are shorter term, some of them for 12 days, some of them for up to a month for people who actually come through. So the sort of traffic that you see there is similar, the difference being is this is considerably smaller. And in terms of the parking that's required, it's also similar. As was mentioned, I know you're considering a rezoning, but frankly, in order to get there, it would require taking down the facility that's there and starting all over again. And you'd have a pretty good crack at us when you got to site plan approval if we were going to do something like that. The limits really that you should know are, that I should mention, is when we did the last application, because the facility was planned for a geriatric population, that's how we did the application. And so when the approval came back, we have a site plan approval that says geriatric psychiatric facility. The certificate of need doesn't distinguish. And so we should be clear in saying that this may not all be senior. It does not, it likely is frankly inclusive in terms of age. It depends really on the certificate of need. So the certificate of need is either adolescent or, and I'll look at Jean and say, is that true? Or adult. And the adult doesn't distinguish. You don't have 55 plus or anything like that. And frankly, there's a possibility that if there were a need or demonstrated need to look for a certificate of need to add adolescent beds, that could also be within the facility. The key is that it's enclosed. It's inpatient care. And although the site plan may include some outdoor area, that area is enclosed. So people have visitors, may have visitors, family certainly is encouraged to come and visit when people are there. But in terms of interaction with the neighborhood, there really isn't any. Now, there's one possibility, and the other reason that you don't have a site plan yet is that Brightwell is looking at adding outpatient services at the same building. It would be a separate entrance It's divided so that the two don't mix in any way, but that would be an addition and is also permitted under the B1 zoning. And when we get to the site plan, then we can tell you more about that. It is similar in terms of what kind of services are offered, but the level of care is different. I guess what I'd like to do is, we're happy to answer questions. I'd like Gene Scallon to tell you a little bit more about the facility itself, and then if you have any questions, we could try and answer those.
Thank you for having us here today. So my name's Jean Scallon. I'm the VP of Operations for Brightwell. I've been in the business of psychiatry for over 30 years. I would be considered one of those 55 and older to enter into our facility, in which we currently have 23 beds. It is a secured facility. We do that to keep people safe. We have average lengths of stay anywhere from 9 days, depending on treatment regimen, to it could be up to 28 days. On an average, probably we've seen over the last year, it's been right around 16 days. They are individuals that most often present with some kind of dementia and a behavioral disturbance that aren't being able to be managed at home. But what we're doing is we're looking about how we can be more inclusive. Our CON says adult, so we can treat an adult population, which seniors are considered adults. But also expanding on that, we were approved for 11 beds as part of that CON process for adults, and we are looking at other ways that we can help out the state of Michigan and the area in providing services to those individuals having a mental health crisis. Because what we know when we get that phone call, it's that family or that person's worst day of their life. And so us being able to be there and answer that call and be compassionate and empathetic is really crucial. So I'm open to any questions you might have about what it looks like, how it feels, or you're also welcome to come and take a tour.
Questions?
Well, thank you for your time.
Oh, I had a
Yes.
couple, sorry, I just defer to the commission first. Is it going to be, just to clarify, two separate adjoining buildings, or is it going to be one building? I know you said that the personnel would be separated, or the patients would be separated per building, but do you have?
Well, from the outpatient, so oftentimes through that outpatient, we want a separate entrance.
Okay.
Oftentimes individuals that are coming in for inpatient may have some behaviors, and so outpatient services, we're not going to see that as much. So to have that separation for privacy, and respectfulness, but the facility itself would all connect, so that we would have continuous areas for efficiencies around, dietary needs, staffing.
And then, kind of a chicken and the egg situation with the CON, but depending on what that looks like, is that going to alter the site plan substantially, or is it more so just going to determine what type of patients you can accept at the facility?
Well, my understanding is, so we're in the site plan, we've already been approved for the 11 beds and have a CON out there for additional beds that are in the kind of the determination phase. So looking to initially build so that we can do the 11 and continue out, because we know the need's there.
So you have a CON for 11 beds already, but you're looking for an additional pool of beds from CON. But that's kind of the hang-up that would contribute to having impacts on your site plan, right?
Yeah.
You could have more beds if you get your CON.
Yes, so
Yeah.
we'd have, I think it's 25 more. So I'd probably have to phase in
Yeah.
how we would do it.
I don't see any additional questions. Thank you.
All right,
Thanks for your
thanks.
time. So I think we will potentially see this item at the next agenda, right? And then we have to open the public hearing too, to see if there's any members of the public that wish to come forward and address the commission on this topic. Seeing none, is there anyone online in the queue
screen. Oh, there we go. No, there's nobody waiting in the queue.
Okay, thank you. All right. So at this point, we'll close the public hearing, and we will see this presumably at the next commission meeting agenda. Thank you. What? Yeah. All right. This brings us on to item number 7, old business. Item 7.1, Ordinance 1525, a rezoning request from Michael Zawacki to rezone a 0.3 acre property at 730 Grove Street. Mr. Bartley?
Thank you. So, as you know, this was, you had a public hearing for this request at your last meeting on October 25th. And now tonight you can choose to make a recommendation to the City Council. This is a request at 730 Grove Street, which is just north of Bertram Drive. The current zoning is R2, which is medium-density single-family residential, and the applicant is proposing to change the zoning to RM32, which is city center multiple-family residential. RM32 is a zoning of the parcels immediately adjacent to this property to the east and south. To the north and across the street to the west, you have other properties that are also currently zoned R2, medium-density single-family. This property is 0.3 acres, frontage on Grove. The applicant has indicated that they're interested in converting this to a bed and breakfast, which is considered within our ordinance a Class B rental, which is a rental property where where tenants have a bedroom but no kitchen facilities, and so no individual kitchen facilities. So things like frat houses also are Class B rental, but so is a bed and breakfast. There had been a question from a commissioner about whether or not the state has a limitation on or a requirement for bed and breakfasts to be owner occupied. And I know that a person during public comment mentioned this as well. I just want to confirm that it's not. Act 230 of 1972 defines bed and breakfast, and as used in this section, bed and breakfast means single-family residential structure that meets all of the following criteria. And A, B, C, one of them says has 10 or fewer sleeping rooms, including any sleeping rooms that may be occupied by the innkeeper. Excuse me, the actual words are including sleeping rooms occupied by the innkeeper, one or more of which are available to rent to transient tenants. So to me, that does not require owner occupancy. It just allows for it. And if the owner does live in the house, then their sleeping room would be counted in that 10-room max. So just wanted to clarify on that. Let's see, back to the zoning map. Yep. So there was. So that's the discussion. We did talk last time about could this property be used for something other than a bed and breakfast in the RM32 zoning, and yes, it could. But the reason the applicant is requesting the RM32 is because it is the same zoning as adjacent properties to the east and south, and also the RM8 and RM14 districts would create do not allow Class B, do not both allow Class B rentals, and also do not have excuse me, have physical requirements for the dimensions of the lot that this property would not meet. So if you were to approve RM8 or RM14, which are districts that are more analogous to the R4 designation within the master plan, you would have a non-conforming situation that you'd be creating. And I would also warn that rezoning a single property like this to a zone district that is not adjacent to it could and would likely be considered spot zoning, which is not allowed. So you have this request, 0.30 acre property to be rezoned from R2 to RM32 for the purposes of intended purpose of having a bed and breakfast, but any use approved by or allowed in the RM32 could potentially be allowed if this rezoning were approved. Can I answer any questions? should I say any more R numbers? R4, RM, you can throw in some odd numbers if you want, but.
R4 is, that's from the future land use map that we, at least presently, don't have an R4 in our zoning code.
Correct. So
Yeah.
the R4 district or designation is the sort of medium density residential, allows for different uses, but the analogous districts within the ordinance are RM8 and RM14, which is not proposed because of those limitations that I mentioned earlier. Should the proposed RM4 district that I mentioned earlier during staff reports be adopted at some point, perhaps that would be more analogous to the R4 designation in the master plan. But for now, we're doing what we can, and that, as I mentioned last time, is typically purposeful, where you don't have exact analogous districts from the master plan to the zoning ordinance, because that approach allows some flexibility in how you apply the zoning ordinance to meet the goals of the master plan. R5. RM96, just throwing out things now.
Continue on that, actually,
Yeah.
that even if at some point in the near future, even in the very near future, if this RM4 were to be seen as a better fit for the proposed zone, use aside, that there wouldn't be a recommendation for the same reasons that you're not recommending that RM8 and an RM14, because it would potentially create a spot zoning situation?
In that case, yeah, I would be concerned about, even if it were a new district, I'd be concerned about spot zoning a single property to any district other than R2 or RM32, which are the existing zoning designations for these properties, or properties around here.
Is R4, or excuse me, is RM32 the closest approximation to R4? I was looking for that in the staff
Yeah,
report.
I think that's hard to say. I guess authoritatively, on one hand, I mean, RM8 and RM14 are considered the closest in accordance with the master plan. However, for various reasons, the applicant might say otherwise. We also have an RM22 between the RM14 and RM32. So it's hard to say exactly what is the closest to what's there now or what's proposed. It is analogous in several places, just not necessarily as much or explicitly as RM8 and RM14 are called out to be.
But for this particular site, what you're inferring is the only things that would be appropriate are RM32 or R2, given the nearby surrounding properties zoned as such.
That's correct.
Is this in the historic district? I know that was referenced earlier.
It is not.
Oh, okay. It's just outside
it's
of it.
quite close. In fact, the property just to the south, 710, is actually a combined property. There's sort of a little, the property immediately to the south on this map, and then at the corner of Grove and Bircham. Those are part of the same property. The south half of that, so this property right here on the corner and then next to it, those are within the, thank you, the historic district. I'm trying to think of the name of it, the College Grove. So you do have adjacent properties that have historic designation, but not this one, one property away. And for what it's worth, the Historic District Commission is aware of this, and they're going to discuss this at least at a high level tomorrow night at their meeting, and may make a recommendation or give opinions to City Council. But they weren't able to do it in time for your consideration tonight because of scheduling.
And there were no changes to the site plan, right?
That's correct.
Or was that considered a site plan with their?
We didn't
It's
ask
just
for
a
too many
rezoning
details,
request,
but
so it's, yeah.
yeah. So the applicant did show the existing structure, which has a garage at the far west end and sort of has two units that are stretched out in a long, thin building behind the garage. And I believe they currently have two units. One of the units has a rental license. There have been no changes, or I guess no proposed site plan that's been submitted or requested.
Noted, thank you. Any additional questions? I don't think the applicant's here. The applicant's, is there an update you'd like to share?
Dane Lewis, BK Civil, the civil engineering consultant. Mike Zawacki's here as well. No additional, I won't repeat myself from last month. You know where we're at. We're trying to remodel to a bed and breakfast, and you're in a tough spot. We're in a tough spot. But I just, the one thing I will repeat is that your future land use map, there's a clear delineation of one color to another color that's our north line. And as you look at R4 and the other properties that are to our south and east, it seems to align with the intent of your future land use to allow this to be rezoned to RM32. The one other thing I wanted to mention this evening is we would like some action this evening. I know there's lots of talk of master plan updates and RM4s and but we have some leases coming up in a few short months, and so we need a direction. We need to move forward or move a different direction. So we would request a decision this evening. So, and we're here if you have any questions before you deliberate.
Thank you. Any questions?
It's a
Vice
huge
Chair?
question, so you're entitled to not answer it if you're disinclined. It's been, according to your application, this is going to be converted into a bed and breakfast. It's been speculated that it might be an Airbnb, an air bed and breakfast.
Yeah, that's not our intent, bed and breakfast, and the owner there, not there, that we haven't determined. So that would be called, in my terms, an inn. So an inn versus a bed and breakfast, that's our plan.
And if I can clarify just from staff that Airbnb versus another kind of B&B is not differentiated within the code.
Right.
This would be considered a Class B rental, and not a hotel.
The last meeting illuminated some of the shortcomings in the ordinance in regard to various uses of those type. Commissioner Lepine?
Same thing as what Commissioner Bowman said. This is a use question, and so I understand you don't have to answer it. But when you presented to us last month, you talked about not making very many updates to the inside, and then tonight you said you were going to remodel. Are there plans? Obviously, we don't have a site plan, but do you have plans to make updates to the building as it currently stands?
Correct. And Mike, maybe you want to come up and speak. The outside of the building, no changes except for the required paving of the driveway. Yep. So that needs to, if we get rezoned, we got to come into compliance. The interior does need remodeling. Do you want to speak to the extent of that? I mean, like you're not moving lots of walls. It's cleanup stuff to kind of make this transition from student rental to a bed and breakfast. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And
Thank
it's
you.
a Frank Lloyd Wright inspired property, so I'd make it more conducive to, I'd put Frank Lloyd Wright stuff in it, a lot of stuff like that, but no moving walls, nothing like that, nothing structural, nothing, just, small furnishings, stuff like that.
Thank you.
Oh, Commissioner Denault, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I'm all the way done. I know when we were considering the proposals on the other side of Grove Street, there was some question about whether or not Alden Dow had been the architect of the house. And I think Chris Wolf actually did some research to find out that it was not designed by Alden Dow, but it was designed by Robert Pond, who I think is another well-known mid-century modern Michigan architect. Do you plan on at all trying to get a historic designation for the property as a local landmark, as a National Register landmark, to sort of, okay.
They're both applications, for both local, state, and national register are in the works. I think they take maybe possibly up to a year, but they have been submitted.
Perfect.
I just
Thank you.
want to clarify for the record. You said yes, there are applications in process.
They've all been submitted already.
Okay. To make this a local landmark.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And that leans into the marketing of the bed and breakfast if we
Yep.
can get that, so you can see
Absolutely.
Mike's intent of the lean in into that, yes.
Yep.
Any additional questions? Seeing none? Oh,
I guess
Commissioner Denal?
I wasn't, please forgive me, I was not in attendance at the last meeting because I was traveling for work, and so this might have already been answered. But if the upzone is not, if the rezoning is not granted, what are your plans for the property? Is it just to continue as rentals? Okay.
Correct. Yep.
All right, thank you. All right. For the purposes of taking this up, I believe a motion is in order. I got a competition at my left and right. I don't know who's going to do it first. But.
We could make a note to bring a hot potato next
Yeah.
time.
I'll be happy
Last
to.
hot potato.
All right,
Yeah, I'll be happy to.
Vice Chair Bowman.
Yes. I would move to recommend. I would like to move to recommend approval of ordinance 1525 for a request from Michael Zawacki to amend the zoning use district map of Chapter 50 zoning of the Code of Ordinances to rezone the 0.3 acre parcel located at 730 Grove Street from R2 medium density single family residential to RM32 city center multiple family residential district, in that it follows in that it meets the 3 criteria outlined in the staff report.
Thank you. Moved by Vice Chair Bowman. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion so that we can have a conversation about this.
Yeah, it's a purely procedural question. So, okay, discussion. Who's first? Commissioner Lapine?
I'm bad about being called on. I think this is a tough one, but I think that I will, I appreciate having this list in front of me of the proposed motions, because you've put this nicer than I can, but I will probably be a no vote on this, because I think that the proximity to the historic district is concerning. I would be really interested, honestly, in hearing the discussion that the Historic Commission has tomorrow. I wish that the timing had worked out on that so we could hear their perspectives and take that into under our consideration. I also think that item number 2 that we have in our packet around the adverse impacts with a future development in terms of having more street traffic and things of that nature, I have concerns over that. So I think for a number of reasons, I'll end up being a no on this one.
Vice Chair.
I'd be happy to. So just by clarification, because it was implied in a couple of the communications that for some reason, because the comprehensive plan has been in place for 5 years, and we actually did a review, if it didn't ultimately become official, Ms. Van Winkle actually presented 3 different potential places where we might consider, where the Planning Commission might consider updating the comprehensive plan. I don't remember ever voting on it. In fact, quite frankly, I think that the 3 things that were proposed were not met with great support, which is the whole point, of course, is bringing these things forward. And as a result of that, they weren't adopted. One of them actually had to do with the block immediately south of this particular block, and it was proposed that that particular block be upzoned or considered for upzoning. And my recollection was that the commission did not recommend that that action be taken. However, though, the comprehensive plan is in place and its effect ultimately until it's updated, that it's not going to do us much good or the city much good if we hold off doing any work. And the comprehensive plan is our governing document, basically, and that in its current form, we have to sort of adhere to the direction that we were given, that has been given to us. It's really not that old. When we were, as a community, were pulled together to determine what the comprehensive plan would say, would ultimately direct us to do, we were asked to take a 20-year view with the expectation that we were going to be, taking a look at it periodically. And again, in my recollection, that happened before Ms. Van Winkle resigned. Ultimately, my sense is that if the use, again, aside from what our purposes here are, if the use changes from a rental unit, which I have it as what you said, there are up to 3 people that were permitted in the Class 4 rental unit, and if we consider an owner having roughly 4 people, that's roughly 7 people that are currently using it, and using it day in and day out, not periodically, not overnight, but that as a permanent residence or a semi-permanent residence as a rental. I'm just guessing.
I think that'd be the maximum. I'm not sure what the current occupancy is.
I was just guessing, right? That I think my sense is that if the use is switched from its current use to a bed and breakfast, that the intensity would be lower, but that's just my sense. I have no idea. So to your point, right? Ultimately, this commission failed to support the recommendation of the mass rezoning of the properties across the street, and I think it was a split vote, and that's fine. Ultimately, that's why we're here to discuss it as a group. And because too many properties were affected, and the potential that might have, the potential development that might have occurred if all the properties were rezoned and then they were all ganged together and sort of massed into one development, I think that gave members of this commission and ultimately the council pause. This is a much smaller proposal, and to my way of thinking is indeed in line with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. Given that rezoning to the more analogous uses is not permitted, but that the proposed use is, I'm certainly concerned that a different, where's the B, Class B rental, has any number of different faces to it, but I'm inclined to support the owner in their request to change this to a potential bed and breakfast.
Lots to unpack there. I'll comment on a few of those comments. I have mixed emotions about this, I think. I do agree with the assessment. I think generally there will be less traffic, and I think to the most of the people around there that maybe weren't aware that this is going to change potential use, that they may not even notice that this is going to change. You could have a family going there to stay and they're only in one car or a couple cars, which could be different than if there's multiple people there staying with their cars if it's a rental. So I don't have any traffic impact. It's not a huge property. There really isn't a use for a lot of cars there. And just a few comments about across the street. Generally, the opposition to that, I think, came from the fact that there really wasn't a clear plan for what they were trying to do there that was presented to us. And there were a lot of contingencies in place for multiple properties owned by multiple different people. And ultimately, I think that was the primary reason that led to that denial. And then when I think about the use of this as a bed and breakfast, I think that could be a really good use for that property. I don't think it being a historic house near the historic district is a bad thing. I think that could incentivize people to want to stay there and experience that. And it's nearby a lot of cool amenities, and I could see that being a benefit to the community. And rezoning this is not an automatic free pass to put whatever you want there. There's still processes in place that they would have to go through if they were going to change the use to, a big apartment building or something like that. But I do have sympathy for the fact that this is, I understand what they're trying to do, and they're trying to rezone this as something potentially that's not even, when you look at something that's an RM32, you don't typically think of a property this size being there, but unless other things change, I don't know what other options they really have at this point. And anything else that's going to be put there would have to come forward with the site plan and go through all those processes. And on the Vice Chair's comments about the master plan, I largely agree. I think it's valid for people to want updates and changes to the master plan. I don't think it's valid for us to just completely disregard that. We can't disregard that until there's something to replace it, right? Like, that's not how laws work. That's not how plans work. You know, I understand if there's a law out there you don't like, you can't just tell, you know, law enforcement or legislators or whoever not to follow it. So that's our guiding document. There was a lot of work that went into that. There's a lot of public feedback that went into that process, and there will be more opportunities to potentially change that document. So I don't know. I'm torn because I understand the intent. I don't think what they're trying to do will be detrimental to the community in any way. But I don't really like this as a RM32, even though there's RM32 nearby. So I don't know. I've been going back and forth on this, so I'm open to hearing any additional perspectives that might sway me one way or the other. So I'm looking on the left side of the table over here.
I'm afraid I
for
don't
some-
have
for some of my
additional
friends that
perspectives
have
because
good
you pretty
opinions.
much summed up my angst about which way to go on this. I'm not entirely comfortable with RM32 and the potential uses, but like you said, there are other processes in place to make sure this doesn't get out of hand. But on the other hand, I'm not terribly concerned that this will change the character of the block in any way that I think is detrimental to the community, so I'm torn as well. Don't really like RM32, but there's no alternative, so. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I wasn't more helpful.
No, I think that's helpful, and you know, it's tough too because I don't know the complete extent of what they're going to do to the property. Are they going to make substantial improvements? It doesn't sound like it's going to be a lot of exterior work aside from the driveway, which is a requirement of the city, and I think it's a dirt driveway now, and you know, I think a paved driveway would be better, although I understand they're increasing the size of that potentially. So I'm not offended by what they're trying to do. This is their pathway to doing what they want to do, and until any other changes are made, I mean, I don't know what other option we have, so it's either this really or nothing, so.
Yeah, I'm also really torn with the RM32 designation, but I think
Who? Oh, yeah.
I was originally a no vote, I think, on this proposal, and at the last meeting I was able to attend, I made some comments about the loss of mid-century architecture especially commercial architecture in East Lansing, and I think that this is an innovative proposal to help preserve and possibly make more open and more accessible a real gem of this city. But I agree with all of the comments so far that I am really sensitive to how residents feel about this proposal. I do think that the argument that the use of it, the day-to-day use, is probably less than it is, will probably be less than it is now. I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough one.
I think that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about it in that way, that, you know, if it stops being used as it is now and potentially it gets roped into a lot of other properties, if there's a master plan change in the future, they could rezone all those and put a big apartment building there that's catered to students or something. And this is kind of a unique way to preserve a historic building that's there. So, yeah, no, I understand both sides of this, so.
Well, one of the things I thought was interesting was what we learned tonight, that there's a move afoot to get historic landmark designation for this property, which kind of relieved some of my concern about what might ultimately happen with this property. I'm more inclined to be supportive, having heard that this evening.
Yeah, I would have to agree, and that's why I actually asked about local designation and national designation. Local designation has more, right, sort of enforcement and teeth behind it versus national designation. Personally, I would feel more comfortable making this approval having seen that documentation or having had those applications approved. But I also understand that it can't hold the applicant hostage, right? Waiting for these processes. But at least seeing maybe the the applications that you had submitted would be helpful.
So could you elaborate on that a little bit? So with that designation, does that restrict any potential demolition or changes to the building? Is that the, oh,
That might be more a question for Mr. Bartley, but from my experience, local designations of historic landmarks do give at least a little bit of space between demolition permit and demolition, if something were to be requested. It doesn't necessarily always make it impossible, but it varies city to city.
Well, and you're not going to see a demolition go through in a historic district without the approval of the HDC.
It's not in the historic district.
Well, if it were to be a
Okay.
landmark,
Yeah.
I should say.
if it's a landmark, would it be added to this?
Just listed.
Oh,
Yeah, it would be considered part of the HDC's purview.
oh, interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
But there is a chance
Commissioner
of
Boyd?
it not being approved, correct, for the historical district? I mean, you've applied for it, but they could still say no.
As far as what? You could say no to your application. That could happen. With a landmark designation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They could-
If I may.
Vice Chair.
My experience with the historic district, which is not insignificant, is that they would, generally speaking, would welcome the opportunity to expand their boundaries. And in this case, because it's immediately adjacent to an existing district, it wouldn't even need to be a landmark. It could be just included in the College Grove Historic District pretty easily.
Yeah.
It's generally the other way around, sort of where the boundaries are asked to be shrunk.
Yeah. Any additional comments? All right, I believe a roll call vote is in order. Mr. Bartley?
All right. This is for a motion to approve, or to recommend approval, excuse me. Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Commissioner Denault?
Yes.
Commissioner Lapine?
No.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Commissioner Bowman?
Yes.
And Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
We have 5 yeses and 1 no, so it passes.
Thank you.
So the next step for this would be that we would have the city council set a public hearing date, and then a public hearing, once set, would be noticed publicly for them to consider this zone change, and then they could choose to make a decision that evening or wait for the subsequent meeting. So.
All right, that brings us on to item 8.1, new business, a draft of the 2024 board meeting calendar. So I think we have to take action on this item, correct?
I would love some action on this item.
All
This
right.
is the 2024 meeting calendar that sticks with the general schedule that you've had of the second and fourth Wednesday of the month. And I included in the memo the calendars for MSU and East Lansing Public Schools, if that matters to the commission. I don't think I identified any dates that conflicted necessarily with those times.
Is the start time for the meetings specified here? It's still planned to be the same?
Oh, no, yeah. It's still 7 o'clock. I know I brought up the possibility of changing the meeting time, but I'm after some discussion with commissioners and staff, I'm certainly not pushing that change or any change right now. Certainly be open to it in the future.
Okay. Any comments? I guess we should probably do a motion first, and then we can talk about. Commissioner Williams.
Approval of the draft 2024 board meeting calendar.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Denault. Discussion. I have no concerns with this.
No issues.
All right. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. That brings us on to item number 9, Commissioner concerns. I had noted some comments about the master plan, but the vice chair beat me to it earlier in the meeting, and I laid out my comments then. So, any other commissioner concerns?
Not so much a concern, but I think Mr. Bartley had asked specifically for direction as to whether or not he should get started. I'm comfortable saying that that sounds like a great idea, but since I will be departing this commission in one more meeting, I will not make that suggestion, but I would support it if somebody else wanted to.
Mr. Bartley, I think that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, I would have
To move ahead with creating a proposal for a master plan update.
I think so, and I think there were some comments at a previous meeting about what the scope should be, and that's probably a good place to start. I think is what scope of what is the scope of our review for this, and
Okay.
I guess a recommendation on that scope at first, and then we could talk about potentially shrinking that focus or elaborating that focus.
Would any planning commissioners be interested in meeting outside of commission meetings with me or other staff to talk about this? If nothing else, to be in the room to hear what we're talking about. If not, make a recommendation. I'd love to have sort of planning commission input before we even come to any kind of language
I have some thoughts, but I'll defer to the
or any kind of proposal.
first.
I mean, it just depends on
Yeah.
days and times. and-
yeah, likewise. I would be interested, but.
Okay.
One of the things we did in the past that I thought was useful is, if we have a series of agendas that are very busy with a lot of proposals on them, we typically wouldn't add that onto it and do those all at once, and we would do that in a special meeting. But if we have a lighter workload of applications, I think we could potentially work it into the standard meetings. That's my opinion, but.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say, I'm glad that we're going to move forward with this. I think there's some pent-up demand, some pent-up, concern among the populace of East Lansing, I think, given all the development we've had in the last 5-7 years, to just revisit these issues and have an opportunity to discuss them. So I think it's a good thing.
Appreciate that.
Agreed? All right. Seeing no additional concerns, I believe a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Williams, seconded by Commissioner Boyd. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned at 8:12 PM.